My name is Elaine Carter, and I'm 41 years old. I'm a quiet, results-driven consultant who spent years building expertise behind the scenes. I don't argue, brag, or compete loudly. I let outcomes speak for themselves. While others underestimated me, I focused on discipline, patience, and long-term growth, turning silence into strategy. The wine glass in Veronica's hand caught the candlelight as she laughed, loud and confident. We were all gathered around my parents' dining table for Thanksgiving, and she was holding court like always. "Honestly, let's be real here," she said, gesturing toward me with her free hand. "Elaine would be absolutely nothing without me pushing her forward all these years." The room went quiet for half a second. Then my mother laughed nervously. My father kept cutting his turkey. My aunt nodded like Veronica had just said something wise. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth, feeling like I'd been slapped. Veronica didn't even look at me as she continued. I mean, who convinced her to take those business classes? Who got her that first internship through my connections? Me. Always me. She took a sip of wine, completely satisfied with herself. Something cracked inside my chest. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more determined. I set down my fork carefully and made myself a silent promise right there at that table. One day, she would see exactly what I was worth without her. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in my old childhood bedroom at my parents' house, staring at the ceiling where I'd stuck glow-in-the-dark stars when I was 10. Veronica's words kept playing in my head like a cruel song on repeat. Asterisk nothing without me. Nothing. Asterisk part of me wanted to believe she was wrong, but another part whispered that maybe she was right. What had I really accomplished on my own? I worked as a junior analyst at a small marketing firm, barely making enough to cover rent and groceries. My business degree hung on my apartment wall, gathering dust while I pushed papers and ran reports nobody read. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through job postings, then online courses, then success stories of people who'd started with less than I had. By 3 a.m, my eyes burned, but something had shifted. I wasn't going to let Veronica's version of my story become the truth. Starting tomorrow, everything would change. Monday morning felt different. I walked into my cramped cubicle at the marketing firm, surrounded by gray walls and fluorescent lights that hummed too loud. My boss barely glanced up as I passed. I was invisible here, just another name on the payroll who showed up and did what she was told. During my lunch break, I sat alone in the empty conference room and opened my laptop. I found 2 online courses, one in advanced data analysis, one in digital marketing strategy. My savings account had exactly $2,312. Not much, but enough to start. I enrolled in both courses right there, my hands shaking as I entered my credit card information. The first lesson started immediately. As the instructor talked about market segmentation and consumer behavior patterns, I felt something wake up inside me. This was my first real step. Small and quiet, but completely mine. Veronica had no idea what I was planning. Nobody did. 3 weeks into my courses, I started seeing things differently. The campaigns my company ran were outdated and wasteful, using strategies that hadn't worked in 5 years. During a team meeting, I almost spoke up, then stopped myself. Nobody here would listen to the quiet girl from the corner cubicle anyway. Instead, I went home and rebuilt our latest campaign from scratch on my own computer. It took me until midnight, but when I finished, I knew it was 10 times better than what we'd actually run. I saved it in a folder called Personal Projects and kept going. That Saturday, I ran into my old college roommate Brielle at the grocery store. She worked for a nonprofit now, and when I mentioned my new courses, her whole face lit up. "We desperately need help with our donor outreach strategy," she said. "Could you maybe take a look at it?" I tried to act casual, but inside I was buzzing with excitement. "Yeah, I'd love to help." Brielle's nonprofit became my testing ground. I spent 2 full weeks analyzing their donor database, finding patterns in giving habits, identifying which messages worked and which ones got ignored. I created a complete outreach plan with specific timing, messaging, and target audiences. When I presented it to their board of directors, the executive director actually stood up and shook my hand hard. "This is exactly what we needed," she said, her voice shaking a little. "How much do we owe you?" I waved her off, saying I was just practicing my new skills, but she refused to let me leave without writing a detailed recommendation letter. That letter became my foundation. I built a simple one-page website that weekend, calling it Carter Consulting Solutions. Using my last name felt bold, maybe even presumptuous, but I needed to sound legitimate. The site was basic, just my services, that glowing recommendation, and a contact form. I posted it on LinkedIn, barely breathing as I hit share. 2 days later, someone I'd never met sent me an inquiry. My first real client was Mrs. Kowalski, who owned a small bakery on the east side of town. She'd seen my LinkedIn post through a mutual connection and needed help attracting younger customers to her traditional Polish bakery. Her budget was tiny, just $500, but I treated her like she was paying me $50,000. I spent hours researching her target market, analyzing what made young people choose one bakery over another, studying her competitors' social media presence and promotional strategies. I created a complete plan with posting schedules, partnership ideas with local coffee shops, and special promotions tied to community events. When I presented everything to her in her tiny office that smelled like fresh bread, she started crying. Actually crying, wiping her eyes with her flour-dusted apron. "Nobody has ever taken my little business this seriously," she said, pulling me into a tight hug. That $500 felt like $1 million. Even better, she told 3 other small business owners about me, and suddenly I had a waiting list. I started waking up at 5 every morning to work before my regular job. 6 months after that terrible Thanksgiving dinner, something unexpected happened. A local business magazine published a feature on emerging consultants in the city, and somehow my name made the list. The article was small, just a paragraph with a tiny headshot, but there it was, Elaine Carter, helping small businesses compete above their weight class. I bought 3 copies and hid them in my apartment like treasure. At Sunday dinner, my mother mentioned seeing it at her hair salon. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she said absently, then immediately turned to Veronica. "And how's your new promotion going?" Veronica launched into a 20-minute story about her fancy title and corner office and the important clients she was managing. I stayed quiet, eating my pot roast and thinking about the 6 new client inquiries sitting in my inbox, all referencing that magazine article. Let Veronica have the spotlight at this table. I was building something much bigger than an audience of 12 family members could understand or appreciate. The real breakthrough came through a chain of referrals I could barely trace back to the source. A tech startup founder named Trevor somehow found my website and called me one Tuesday evening. His company had developed an app for freelance workers, but downloads had stalled completely. He was desperate. "I'll pay you $3,000 if you can figure out what's wrong," he said. It was more money than I'd ever been paid for anything in my life. I took a week of vacation from my regular job and dove into his business completely. I interviewed his existing users, analyzed every competitor, studied App Store algorithms, and identified 3 critical problems in how they were positioning themselves. My final presentation was 42 slides of pure strategic gold. Trevor called me 3 days after they implemented my suggestions. "Downloads tripled," he said, his voice shaking with excitement. He sent me a $2,000 bonus and introduced me to 5 other startup founders who needed help. I kept running into Veronica at family events, and every single time, she found a way to diminish what I was doing. At Easter, she brought her new boyfriend Preston, a corporate lawyer, and spent the entire meal talking about his impressive cases and her big promotion at work. When my aunt asked about my consulting work, Veronica jumped in before I could answer. "Oh, Elaine does some cute freelance stuff online," she said, waving her hand like she was swatting away a fly. "It's adorable, really. I keep telling her she should think bigger, you know? Maybe I could introduce her to some real professionals at my company." I smiled politely and didn't mention the $18,000 contract I'd just signed with a regional retail chain. Didn't mention that I was working 70-hour weeks and loving every exhausting minute of it. Preston seemed genuinely interested and asked what kind of consulting I did, but Veronica changed the subject to their upcoming vacation in Cancun. I excused myself early, saying I had a client call in the morning, which was actually true. Keeping my regular job became impossible. I was taking client calls in bathroom stalls, working on presentations during lunch breaks, running on 4 hours of sleep every night. One Tuesday morning, my boss called me into his office. "Your performance has been slipping," he said, not even looking up from his computer screen. "You seem distracted lately." I apologized and promised to do better, then spent the rest of the day calculating my finances in a hidden spreadsheet. My consulting income had exceeded my salary for 3 straight months. That night, I drafted a resignation letter, my hands trembling as I typed. This felt insane. I was throwing away job security, health insurance, a steady paycheck, everything sensible. But I was also drowning, trying to serve 2 masters when one of them was pulling me towards something so much bigger. I saved the letter but didn't submit it yet. On Thursday, I landed a $40,000 contract with a manufacturing company that needed complete market repositioning. Friday morning, I walked into my boss's office and handed him my resignation letter without hesitation. Freedom felt like breathing for the first time in years. Without my regular job constraining me, I could focus completely on building my consulting practice. I rented a small office space in a shared building downtown, just a desk in the corner. But it was mine. I hired a part-time assistant named Keisha, a recent graduate who was brilliant with spreadsheets and social media management. My client list exploded from 12 to 34 within 3 months. I started saying no to projects that didn't excite me, something that would have terrified me a year earlier. Meanwhile, Veronica's LinkedIn showed her posting about networking events and team-building exercises at her company. She never mentioned my business, probably still thought it was just a hobby. I didn't bother correcting her. I was too busy building something real, expanding beyond simple consulting projects into full business strategy overhauls. An investor I'd worked with casually mentioned wanting to discuss scaling opportunities. I scheduled the meeting, barely able to contain my excitement. At Thanksgiving, exactly 1 year after Veronica's crushing comment, I noticed something different about her. She was quieter than usual. Her confidence dimmed somehow. My mother mentioned privately that Veronica's company had gone through layoffs, though Veronica had kept her job. "It's been really stressful for her," Mom said. "Her new manager is apparently very demanding." Later, Veronica pulled me aside in the kitchen. "How's your consulting thing actually going?" she asked. There was something new in her voice. Not quite respect, but maybe the absence of contempt. "It's going really well," I said simply. "Better than I expected, honestly." My mother interrupted to say she'd heard from Aunt Rita that I'd been featured in another business publication. Veronica's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's great," she said flatly. After dinner, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway, complaining to Preston about her impossible boss and colleagues who didn't appreciate her talents. I felt a strange mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. I remembered what that felt like. The investor meeting changed absolutely everything. His name was Harrison Wright, a serial entrepreneur in his mid-40s who'd built and sold 3 successful companies. We met at an upscale coffee shop downtown, and he didn't waste time on small talk. "I've been watching your client results," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "You're exceptionally good at finding inefficiencies that others miss completely. What if we scaled this properly? Real office space, full team, national client base." My heart hammered so hard I thought he could probably hear it. What exactly would that look like? He opened the folder to show financial projections, growth models, detailed market analysis. "I provide capital and industry connections. You provide the strategic expertise and leadership. We build something significant together." I took the folder home and barely slept, reviewing every single page until my eyes burned. The numbers were ambitious but achievable. The risks were enormous but calculated. By Monday morning, I'd made my decision. I called Harrison and said yes. We formed Carter Strategic Consulting as an official limited liability company. I was CEO and majority owner. Suddenly, my one-person operation transformed into a real company with office leases, employee contracts, business insurance, and a formal leadership structure. I hired 3 junior consultants and promoted Keisha to operations manager. Growth came fast and fierce. Within 8 months, we had 18 employees and clients in 11 states. I worked brutal 18-hour days, learning about HR policies and tax compliance, figuring out how to manage teams and delegate effectively. I made plenty of mistakes, hired wrong, misjudged project scopes, underpriced some contracts, but I learned from every single one. My team was young and hungry, consultants who'd been overlooked at bigger firms but had sharp minds and fresh perspectives. We built a reputation for taking on challenging projects that others rejected as too difficult. A pharmaceutical company hired us to rebuild their collapsed customer service system. A restaurant chain brought us in to rescue their failed expansion strategy. We delivered results that got written about in trade publications. Meanwhile, through family gossip, I heard Veronica was struggling. Budget cuts, project cancellations, management changes. The application arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Keisha brought me a stack of resumes for an open senior consultant position. I was reviewing a client proposal, halfway through my third coffee, barely paying attention as I flipped through the candidates. Then I saw the name at the top of one resume. Veronica Carter. My hand froze mid-turn. I read it again, certain I was hallucinating from exhaustion and caffeine. But there it was, her education, her work history, her skills laid out in careful detail. My sister, who told everyone I was nothing without her, who dismissed my work as a cute hobby, had just applied to work at my company. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. I sat back in my chair, holding the resume with slightly trembling hands. My first instinct was immediate rejection, giving her a taste of the dismissal she'd served me so often. But then a better idea formed. I read through her qualifications carefully and objectively. On paper, she was decent, not exceptional, but competent enough for an entry-level version of the role. A slow smile spread across my face. I decided to interview her personally. When I added Veronica's name to my calendar, Keisha's eyebrows shot up. "You know this candidate?" she asked carefully. I smiled. "She's my younger sister." The look on Keisha's face was absolutely priceless, but she was too professional to push for details. On interview day, I dressed in my best navy suit, the expensive one I'd bought after my first six-figure contract. I arrived early and sat in my corner office. Yes, I had a corner office now with floor-to-ceiling windows, reviewing Veronica's resume one final time. At exactly 10 o'clock, Keisha escorted her in. Veronica walked through my door with her usual confidence and polished appearance, then stopped dead when she saw me sitting behind the executive desk. "Elaine." Her voice cracked slightly. "What are you doing here?" I gestured calmly to the chair across from me, keeping my expression completely neutral and professional. "I'm the CEO," I said simply. "Please sit down. Let's discuss why you want to work at Carter Strategic Consulting." Watching realization dawn across Veronica's face made every sleepless night, every doubt, every moment of struggle over the past 2 years absolutely worth it. She sank into the chair slowly, her usual composure completely shattered. You own this company," she said, not quite making it a question. I nodded calmly, opening my leather portfolio and clicking my pen. "I founded it 19 months ago. Now, let's talk about your qualifications for this position." To her credit, Veronica tried to recover quickly. She straightened her shoulders, cleared her throat, and launched into practiced answers about her marketing experience and strategic thinking abilities. I listened carefully, taking detailed notes, asking probing questions about specific campaigns she'd managed and challenges she'd overcome. Some of her answers were reasonably solid. Others revealed significant gaps in her knowledge that she tried to cover with confidence and impressive-sounding jargon. After 40 minutes, I closed my portfolio. "Thank you for coming in today. We'll contact you with our decision within 1 week." She stood hesitantly. "Why didn't you tell me about any of this?" I met her eyes steadily. "You never asked." For 3 long days, I wrestled with what to do. My leadership team argued strongly against hiring her. "She's qualified but nothing special," Keisha said bluntly during our discussion. And mixing family with business could get really messy really fast. She was absolutely right on both counts. But I kept thinking about that Thanksgiving dinner, about Veronica declaring I'd be nothing without her. What better way to prove her wrong than demonstrating I could succeed at levels she'd never imagined, while still being professional enough to give her a fair opportunity despite our complicated history. I called her Friday afternoon. "Veronica, this is Elaine. I'm offering you the senior consultant position at a probationary level." Dead silence on the other end of the line. "Really?" she finally managed. "Yes. You have relevant experience, and we need someone who can start immediately. Your first project involves working with a retail client on their regional expansion strategy. You'll report directly to me." More heavy silence. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I promise I won't let you down." I hung up, genuinely wondering if I'd just made a brilliant strategic move or a terrible mistake. Time would tell. Veronica's first day was awkward for absolutely everyone involved. She arrived wearing an expensive designer suit, clearly trying to make a strong impression, but I could see uncertainty flickering in her eyes. I introduced her to the team with simple professionalism. "This is Veronica Carter, our new senior consultant. She'll be taking lead on the Riverside Retail Expansion Project." If anyone noticed we shared a last name, nobody mentioned it out loud. I assigned her a standard workspace, not a corner office, just a regular desk in our open floor plan, and handed her the thick project files. "I need your initial analysis and recommendations by Wednesday," I said. "We have our client call Thursday morning. Any questions?" She shook her head, and I walked away, leaving her to figure things out independently. Over the next week, I watched her struggle from a distance. The project was legitimately complex, requiring detailed market research, competitive analysis, and strategic planning. She worked late. I could see her desk lamp still glowing when I left at 8. But when Wednesday arrived, her analysis was disappointingly surface level, missing key insights that any of my other consultants would have caught immediately. The Thursday client call was a complete disaster. Veronica presented her analysis with her usual confidence, but the client, a sharp woman named Ms. Patterson, immediately started poking holes in it. "These demographic assumptions seem seriously outdated," she said. "And you're not accounting for the new shopping center opening just 2 miles from your proposed location." Veronica fumbled badly, trying to defend her work, but I watched Ms. Patterson's confidence in us drain away by the second. I stepped in smoothly, taking control. "Let me address those concerns directly," I said, pulling up a much more detailed analysis I'd prepared as backup. I walked through updated demographics, comprehensive competitive analysis including the new shopping center, and 3 alternative locations we should seriously consider. Miss Patterson visibly relaxed, nodding along. "Now this is exactly what I needed to see," she said. After the call ended, I summoned Veronica to my office. She sat across from me, face flushed with obvious embarrassment. "I should have dug much deeper into the research," she admitted quietly. I nodded. "Yes, you absolutely should have. At this company, we never present anything unless it's thoroughly researched and completely accurate." "Understood." She nodded. "It won't happen again." But it did happen again. And again. Over the following month, Veronica made a consistent pattern of small but significant mistakes. Missed deadlines, incomplete research, presentations that looked polished on the surface but lacked real substance underneath. My other consultants started noticing. During a regular team meeting, Yuki, one of my sharpest analysts, diplomatically suggested implementing a peer review system for all project work. "Just to catch any potential gaps before client presentations," she said carefully. I approved it immediately, knowing it would create another accountability layer specifically for Veronica. The peer reviews made her mistakes painfully visible to everyone. Other consultants would return her work covered in detailed notes about what she'd missed or gotten wrong. I watched her frustration steadily build, saw her staying later and later every night, desperately trying to match the quality standards my team maintained consistently. She wasn't incompetent exactly. She was just average in a company that demanded genuine excellence. At Sunday dinner, she barely spoke anymore, picking at her food while my mother talked endlessly about my cousin's upcoming wedding plans. The breaking point came on the Hudson manufacturing project, our biggest contract that quarter. I assigned Veronica to the project team, honestly hoping the high-stakes environment would finally push her to perform at a higher level. Instead, she made a critical error in the financial projections, overestimating their potential cost savings by nearly 30%. Fortunately, her team lead caught it before it reached the client, but barely. I called her into my office immediately, and this time I was genuinely angry, not just disappointed. This mistake could have cost us the entire contract and seriously damaged our reputation, I said firmly. "What happened?" She sat there with tears welling in her eyes. I don't know. I thought I'd triple-checked everything. She trailed off helplessly. Maybe I'm just not good enough for this level of work. I softened slightly, remembering my own early struggles and failures. You absolutely have the intelligence, I said more gently. But you're not putting in the necessary work to develop real expertise. You're relying on surface-level thinking and hoping confidence will carry you through. It won't. Not here. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. I gave her one final chance, a straightforward market analysis project for a local restaurant group looking to expand. It was exactly the kind of work she should have been able to complete easily, standard research with clear recommendations. This is your opportunity to prove you genuinely belong here, I told her directly. Show me what you're actually capable of producing. She worked on it for 2 solid weeks, and I deliberately stayed completely out of it, letting her succeed or fail entirely on her own merits. When she finally presented her analysis, I read through it carefully and thoroughly, genuinely hoping to see real improvement. Instead, I found lazy research, generic recommendations that could apply to literally any restaurant business, and conclusions that didn't properly match the data she'd presented. It was obvious she'd rushed through it, still relying on style over substance. I closed the folder and looked at her steadily. This isn't acceptable work, I said simply. You're capable of much better, but you're consistently not delivering it. She started to protest, but I held up my hand firmly. We'll discuss your future with this company next week. The following Monday, I announced a comprehensive company restructuring to the entire team. We were growing fast enough to need much clearer hierarchies and more specialized roles. I promoted 3 of my strongest consultants to team lead positions. I moved 2 others into specialized research analyst roles. And I reassigned Veronica to a junior analyst position, essentially a significant demotion, where she'd work under one of the new team leads on basic research tasks and foundational projects. I made the announcement in a company-wide meeting, keeping my tone completely professional and emotionally detached throughout. When I mentioned Veronica's reassignment, I saw her face flush deep red, but she stayed silent. After the meeting ended, she came directly to my office, anger finally breaking through her usual composure. You're deliberately humiliating me, she said, her voice shaking. I shook my head calmly. I'm placing you in a role that accurately matches your current performance level and demonstrated capabilities. If you want to advance in this company, prove you deserve it through consistently quality work. That's exactly how it works here for everyone. She stared at me for a long moment, and I watched understanding finally dawn across her face. This wasn't about revenge or spite. It was simply about maintaining standards. I seriously underestimated you, she said very quietly. For years, I underestimated you. I nodded once. Yes, you did. 6 months later, I sat in my corner office, looking out at the city skyline stretching endlessly before me. Carter Strategic Consulting now employed 37 people across 5 offices in 3 different states. We'd just been featured prominently in a major business magazine as one of the fastest-growing consultancies in the entire region. My personal income had reached levels I literally couldn't have imagined when I was sitting invisible in that cramped cubicle years ago, underestimated and overlooked by everyone around me. Veronica was still with the company, working steadily in her junior analyst role. To her genuine credit, she'd finally stopped complaining and started actually learning and improving. Her work quality had gotten noticeably better, slowly but steadily. We maintained careful professional distance at work and polite civility at family dinners. She never directly apologized for that devastating Thanksgiving comment, but I didn't particularly need her to anymore. Her presence here in my company, working under my direct leadership, completing work I assigned her, that was acknowledgement enough of the truth. Last Sunday, when my aunt asked how I'd managed to build such an impressive business, Veronica spoke up before I could answer. She did it completely herself, she said quietly, meeting my eyes directly across the table. All of it without anyone's help. I smiled slightly, raising my water glass in her direction. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so undeniably successful that even the people who doubted you most have absolutely no choice but to recognize your genuine worth. And maybe if you're fortunate, they learn something valuable about themselves in the process.